Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Athens City Council. This is a regular session of council. Tonight is Monday, October 20th, 2014. I am acting as President Pro Tem this evening while President Sands is out. We do have a quorum this evening. We will establish a quorum here. We're missing Member Reisner, but we do have a quorum. Second, we will take a disposition of the minutes. So is there a motion to approve our regular session of minutes held from October 16th, 2014?
So
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from October 6th, 2014. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. The minutes have been approved. At this juncture in the meeting, we are looking at communications. Are there any communications from council members? I will briefly acknowledge that we have been receiving many phone calls, emails, and written letters regarding some local issues and possible changes to the trash code and the current trash code. So I do want to acknowledge that we have been receiving those, and this evening, since we are at second reading, there will be an opportunity for brief 3-minute public input from citizens that so desire to speak on that issue. Any other communications? How about reports and communications from elected officials, beginning with Mayor Weil?
A couple things. I'm kind of still catching up speed since I was out last week for family matters. I do want to acknowledge that we have an award that we were presented with the engineering for the Historic Preservation Office, Ohio Historic Preservation Office. Essentially, this is for the Oxbow Bridge. It goes to Joan Stuckey, which was the engineer and the constructor, Shelley and Sands, City of Athens, of course. This is for our renovation of the Oxbow Bridge in terms of historical, not so much accuracy, but preservation as much as possible. They did a report on it. Of course, they were kind of surprised that we took the time to do the railings and make the deco fascias and all the other stuff. So I just want to give you information that we did do that. I believe I was out of town at the time. The Service Safety Director went up to Columbus to receive the award. Again, this is something that shows, from reading the dialogue in here, it sounds like it's unusual that somebody would take the time to do that. A couple other things too. Late in the day, we put out a notice that there'll be one-lane traffic on University Terrace. I guess there's a delivery going on to Tupper Hall, some infrastructure stuff, and so therefore they'll be pulling the parking meters and have flaggers on either side. They say starting at 7 a.m. going to 3:30. So I would advise nobody going through there if they can avoid it. Other things, and again, I'm still trying to play catch-up, of course. Halloween's coming up, so you're all aware of that. Safety teams, we're looking always for volunteers for safety teams. Contact Ron Lucas, our Deputy Service Safety Director, as well as we're going to have our Uptown Business Association Halloween and the little kids all coming up. And I'd give you the dates, but that would kind of take too much time. Also, the leaf map is out, so just so you guys know what's going on with that, too. If you want to go to the city website, you can find out when the leaf pickup is occurring. And I believe that covers everything I need to cover. Oh, wait a second, one more thing. They're going to be painting some things on West Union, the lines and street painting, but I suspect that's delayed due to the rain. Thanks.
President Butler.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Weil. We do have another communication from Councilmember Pappy.
Would you like to mention about the Ebola that the city put out in terms of the information from the Public Health Department and the WHO? I think it's on our website.
It's
correct?
on the website, but I haven't really looked at it. I just, it's looking at protocols and how to be safe about it. Again, it's an exotic little virus there, but other than that, until it shows up, I know it's supposedly it could have passed through Ohio and everything like that, but I'll worry about it when it comes.
But on the same line, everybody should get their flu shots, and people are much more likely to be exposed to flu. There are 56,000 people who die of flu a year in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. I know citywide we had an employee flu shot session, sometime in the first week of October. and we've extended to the county employees as well, and family members. I'm sure you got the memo on that, right?
And county health department offers it also to the community, so
Yeah.
that's a wonderful service.
Yeah, so, and most insurance companies cover a lot of that as preventative medicine, so that's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor Weil. Reports and communications from Auditor Heck.
I have my revenue projections tonight. I apologize for being late, so I'm going to hand out some paperwork before I start.
Sure. Thank you.
Did I get any?
Thank you for
Can't forget the mayor, sorry.
bearing witness with us.
Do you have a copy for yourself?
Okay, good. Do you want one? Sure. They, yeah, they have the other one. They have the other one.
I think it's just down
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry for the confusion. Is that this one?
Oh,
Okay.
more. Okay.
Sorry. So much paperwork. Has everybody got their papers, or they think they do? I know they look a lot alike. So it's Excel spreadsheets, and you should have 2 debt schedules, one for this year, one for next year. Income tax projection and carryover projection. If we're ready, I'll go ahead and get started. So this is my annual revenue projection for council for 2015. I've included a list of carryover estimates in the papers I just handed out that were prepared by Auditor Ray Hazlett. As you all know by now, we always look closest at the general fund. We're projecting a $2 million carryover this year. As with several other funds, the personnel lines were slightly over budgeted. We tend to fund each department at the fullest staffing level to prevent any shortages at the end of the year. Although our income tax revenue has come in almost flat this year, it is still slightly above projections. If you look at the bottom of the income tax projection sheet, I used to hand these out a little more regularly. You probably haven't gotten one, but it looks like this. You'll see that we factored in the CCA revenue from last year to get a more accurate projection of what we actually brought in this year. We also took into account continuing cuts from the state when we were budgeting. So now, and so on there, we're over about $128,000 on our income tax revenue for this year, which isn't bad. But it's just flat. It's like actually 1.1% increase. So next, if you'll look at the initial estimate of resources for 2015, I'm going to address just a few of the major funds. Although we projected $2 million carryover in the general fund for next year, that with the estimated new resources really just brings us slightly over our current budget. If you look across there, the general fund is the first line where we've shown our resources for this year. Our balance at the end of last year, our projected carryover for this year, as I said, it's almost $2 million. And then our estimated revenues for next year brings us to estimated resources for next year at $13,488,000. However, then if you look on over, and I only did this for a few of the major funds, and I could do it for all, but it's in your report so you get monthly, but I just did it for the major ones so as not to be too confusing. Our budget, current appropriated budget for the general fund is $13,446,000, which is only about $40,000 difference from what we expect next year. Now, that being said, I do expect the carryover to be slightly larger, but we also have to keep in mind that we have contract obligations for pay raises, salary raises, and of course, council, I assume, will be looking at raises for non-union staffing also. So it's just something to look at and see where we are in the general fund. Yeah, and so anyway, that is sort of an issue because it doesn't leave anything for unexpected expenses. And the general fund, because of all the general revenue in there, is the one fund that you can fund anything in the city out of. You can't move money from other funds into the general fund, but it goes the other way because of the general tax revenue. We don't often do that, and you're not supposed to support other funds with general fund revenue, but if there were an emergency, such as a vehicle, and the other department didn't have the money, you could take that out of the general fund. However, you can't use those other monies to help support the general fund, so it's tight. The street fund is another big one. It actually looks better than I thought it would, although it's also fairly close with about $100,000 over this year's budget projection. As I said, that's actually better than I thought it would. However, that's not a lot of money in the street fund. You know, almost anything they do is expensive and would take that amount of money. Even a grant match, you know, would be eat that up right away. So I think the main thing to keep in mind is unexpected expenses and emergencies and why you need that extra money unappropriated. Fees for services are another big one, water, sewer, and garbage. They're in pretty good shape, although the water fund has been depleted somewhat this year by an increase in projects. Still, it looks like there'll be about $600,000 above the current budget available. Again, in the water fund, $600,000 is fairly safe, but you know, those projects run into hundreds of thousands of dollars and into the $1 million as we go along. So, however, as I said, it's not as bad as I thought it might be. If you look at the unappropriated balance sheet, I think I gave everyone that last week. We will have some carryover. The change in percentage of fees and special assessments allocated in the sewer and sewer debt fund has really helped the sewer fund this year. I believe that was just last year when you changed the split, and it's made really both funds fairly healthy. And quite a bit of money actually has been transferred this year, though, as you well know. We were up to $290,000, and you just did another 50 or so from sewer into sewer operating. Those big funds are just very active, and there's a lot of projects going on there that you have to fund all the time. So, but it's something to watch as you start taking money out of the sewer debt fund, because we do have sewer debt. We will be taking on even more debt as the wastewater treatment plant moves along. So if you look on the spreadsheet with the estimate of resources, we took the, this will be on the second page, excuse me. We took the loan proceeds out of our projected carryover, our estimated resources. The loan proceeds refers to the wastewater treatment plant, and that's about $14 million. So if you add that onto the $3 million that we have there as projected resources, then you come up to about $17 million. And our current budget this year is $16 million, which includes that. So the sewer fund is doing pretty well, and sewer debt fund. The garbage fund should have almost $2 million over the current budget available. So I'd say no worries there. And I didn't put that one in there, but another thing, the community recreation funds, those are other big funds that continue to balance their expenditure with their revenue. However, the extra money available is less than it has been in past years. I've also included debt schedules for this year and next year. I plugged in the new numbers for pay down on the ladder truck if you want to look at those. And the wastewater treatment notes, the engineering notes that we took out several years ago. For next year's balance, we just talked about that last week. And the State Street note was paid off this year. That was a $9 million project that we don't have anymore. So that leaves the TIP money that we were using to pay that down with available for the street projects. And as you're probably all aware, I believe Andy already has plans for that, which is fine. As we close out October and November, I will have more accurate figures and will continue to update you for the final budgeting process. Please keep in mind that while thoughtful and based on experience, these projections are just that, projections. It's, as many of you know, we've gotten letters from PERS, they've made changes, we have several people retiring at the end of the year, so that involves payouts of vacation and sick time available and things like that. So those will be some extra expenses, and just depending on what people want to use. A lot of people wait, and in my office we do the same thing till the end of the year to see what kind of money is available, if there's a piece of equipment, computer equipment or something that they might feel they need but aren't sure if the money is going to be there, that will happen at the end of the year. So that's mainly it, but if you want to go back to this, the estimate of resources page, we did make some notes there. As far as the estimated resources, what might affect that, and we won't know that until later in the year or even next year. The funds that get grants, the levy that's on there, if that would, if that levy passes, then we will have increased revenue coming in the future. Mostly grant loans, if we take out a loan for the parking garage repairs, will affect all that. But as I said, I think we'll know more by the end of the year. I made that kind of quick and short and sweet, but does anybody have any questions?
Any questions from council members?
Just back to the sheet of estimated resources, two accounts that, the transportation assistance, account number 214, it's about the third line, third line down.
Right.
And so it's showing estimated resources of 602, but current budget is 304, so that's looking healthy. Is that our Athens transit and
It is.
buses, and in fact, maybe, okay, that might be up a little bit because of that bus that we're...
Yeah, we're going to actually, they have some capital projects they want to put together. I think they want to try for another bus. Part of the dialogue I've had with Michael Lockman was they're trying to get a GPS system on top. So they're leveraging some of the capital money to go for those grants. There's also I have yet to hear about the JARC grant, which they briefed on, I think in August, no, it's July, I think it was, sometime earlier this year. I have yet to hear whether they're going to be awarded that or not at this point. So that would also be part of the mix.
Keep in mind that last year isn't, I'm sure it was last year.
Sent in, yeah.
Yeah, you added them to the, tax percentage mix, so that they do have revenue in there, instead of starting off with nothing and having to transfer money out of the general fund. So that's part of the reason why they look fairly healthy at this point.
Well, and that's good. My only other question is the very last line on the back page, internal services medical. And I'm looking at estimated revenues, 2.6, estimated resources, 2.6 million. But then the current budget, am I understanding that right, is 3.1. So that's kind of a...
That's another discussion that I don't know that you want to have tonight.
No, just
yeah.
noting that.
I did notice that, and we increased those amounts. Those are transfers from other funds, and that's something we'll have to look at.
The breakdown as well. And I think we've been I discussed with the Finance Personnel Committee about meeting Wednesday at 3. Is that okay with you? Mm-hmm. Okay. It might be long. Usually it's 2:30, but there's a Halloween press conference, so it might take longer. The other thing I will note the issue 1 funds, the grants for the Ohio Public Works, is going to be more difficult to get because some of the changing in the scoring has gone over. So that's going to be a little bit more tenuous, just so you know that.
Well, we projected 0 in there, so you'll have to keep us posted.
Will do. Okay. Okay, some of the other questions, of course, I've had is, can you send us a spreadsheet so I can start incorporating it into my budget?
Sure.
Okay. And again, the meeting this Wednesday, and I guess one of the questions that Chris had was whether we should spend any appropriations today in some of the first readings. I think there's some funds.
A return of some grant funds for probation.
10414 maybe. I know I'm drifting from the topic, but since we're fielding questions.
Yeah.
There's that one, and there's another appropriation, which is the engineering service, is that the, no, authorization engineering services, 107 maybe?
Yeah,
104.
actually, if you don't mind, just looking at 10414, the first line on there, yeah, it's hard when you come back, and we didn't meet last week
Nope.
to talk about some of this stuff. I believe that community corrections, that court fund has to pay that money back, and
As soon as possible?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're appropriating the money for that, but just for that one right there, it probably should be suspended.
As I see also school share of TIF, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that needs to be paid too.
Thank you, Auditor Heck. Any other questions for the auditor? Mayor?
No.
You good? And lastly, I want to make sure I double check with Law Director Lang. Any communications?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Okay, moving on to ordinances for third reading. So we will be voting on these ordinances, and I will be casting a vote as well, even though I'm President Pro Tem. Ordinance 8314, an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 9, Chapter 9.14, nuisance parties, Section 9.14.99, penalty, introduced by Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt ordinance 8314.
Second.
Thank you. As has been mentioned several times, this has been an ordinance a long time in coming. It started back in February in looking at restructuring the penalty to where initially it was a misdemeanor charge. It has been changed under this ordinance to a civil penalty, a civil fine of $150, where the individual has the right to contest that by going down to the police station, at which point they will be given a misdemeanor charge to appear in court and contest it. Something I do want to point out about this particular ordinance, because I know there's been several communications that I've had with constituents around the city, and that has to do with this particular ordinance in losing some of its teeth. And in fact, the ordinance itself does not. We believe it's fair and balanced the way it was crafted. And in particular, one of the things is that when a particular house is cited with this particular fine, then what will happen is they will be asked to cease and desist, at which point if the house does not cease and desist, then it becomes, it goes through the normal course of being a minor misdemeanor at that point in time. So that said, again, I wanted to kind of give everyone a recap on that particular piece of legislation. It's a piece of legislation that's had a lot of student body input, and as well as citizens throughout the city of Athens.
Mayor Wong.
I would point out at staff meeting, Chief Pilot mentioned that he's saying, how soon do we have to, we have 30 days after the signature of this particular ordinance. He's still looking at the citation type of ticket that would be done. I think he's probably going to talk to the law director about that. He's probably talked to, I think, Paskey. The idea is this is going to be a non-criminal, fine or citation. He just wants to make sure the wording's correct, and he has to print them up. So don't expect it to be, dropping a hammer 30 days from now. I think that was the dialogue I had with him. So patience, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We have any other comments or questions? We have a motion and a second for the ordinance. All those in favor of the ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 8414, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 9, General Regulations, Chapter 9.01, Animals, introduced by Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt 8414.
Second.
Thank you. Again, just real briefly, this particular piece of legislation changes. It used to be the loud dog ordinance, and now it's a loud animal ordinance. What this particular ordinance allows for is for a code enforcement officer or for a police officer, if a call comes in that there's a loud disturbing dog that's barking and not stopping, that house can now be issued a warning or a citation starting at $20. Again, this is one way to where someone who may be a stay-at-home parent or work at home or whatever, it's a quality of life issue for this particular piece of legislation.
Thank you, Member Patterson. Questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of ordinance 8414, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, at the same sign. Ordinance 8414 has been adopted. Moving on to ordinance 8514, an ordinance authorizing funds for the Athens Armory Stabilization and Improvement Study and authorizing the mayor to accept donations for the study, design, and renovation. Again, introduced by Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt 85-14.
Second.
Thank you. This particular piece of legislation is kind of a two-parter. One, in that it allows for now a stabilization assessment of the armory. One hasn't been done since 2003, and with an unheating or cooled building, things can happen. So therefore, it'll afford for that. And the other thing it'll afford for is accepting donations under the Armory/Hudson budget line, so that individuals wanting to donate to the planning or renovation of the armory itself, they can do so.
Thank you, Member Patterson. Questions or comments?
I have one comment. I've had several people say, why can't the one that was done in 2003 suffice? Now, you basically talked to that a little bit, but you may want to just speak a little bit of what has happened over the last 10 or so years, because they're saying, why are we wanting to put more money into this when there was already a plan? You may just, since this is our final reading, you may want to discuss that a little bit more.
Sure. The 2003 assessment was, I don't know the complete history, but it was probably actually done in 2001 or 2002 to move this thing forward. So there has been, it's a little bit longer than meets the eye in terms of the timetable here. And like any building that is sat vacant without any heating or cooling to that building, a lot can happen in that 10 to 12 year period of time. And so this is getting another structural assessment of the building itself. If I'm not mistaken, Mayor, you may have the answer to this, that there has been roof repairs that have been done in that time.
Yeah, we replaced the roof. It was actually, we did 2 replacements since we've owned it. The first time was done inadequately, so we had to redo it. A lot of the study that they're talking about was done by the museum, Genealogical and Historical Museum here, with the idea at that time of trying to move into the place. They, of course, did not do that. I think there was sometime early or late last year a guesstimate of what the cost would be. Their total cost at the time was about $3 to $5 million, somewhere in that range. I forget exactly. But just to make it accessible for public, which means ADA, heating, asbestos abatement, lead paint abatement, water, electricity would be about $1 million at that time, they estimated. I think there was an estimate earlier this year or late last year that you just round up to about 1.8, but it would be nice to get a solid number. At the same time, I look at it as the best thing to actually do is to see if we can stabilize it temperature-wise, because we are keeping records in there, and I'd like to make it just something that would be better for records as we have it, not just as a dump all place. That was what we've done, is that storage, because you know how we like to store stuff whenever possible. So that's really going to be the thrust of this, is, as you say, stabilization improvements. The roof is good. Some of it needs to be cleaned up. The wiring, as far as electric's adequate, but the plumbing is non-existent, and so is heat, as well as ADA accessibility. So these are the issues, the main ones. And this is study. This is not going to be doing anything with it unless we can find the monies and the direction for it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Wild, and thank you, Member Pappy. And correct me if I'm wrong, before I call on the auditor, I believe also that in speaking to the concerns that Member Pappy has raised, we also now have a historical preservation district, correct? And
we have a commission, and we do have historic preservation areas, but I don't think that covers that. I don't know if it covers that district or not. I think the Uptown district is covered, and one of the limitations, of course, and I've been in some of the discussions there, is that you really couldn't change the outside facade or the frontage of it. So you're limited to what you can do there. A lot of times, the historic preservation is actually in the form of tax abatements, or tax credits, I should say. Considering that's off the tax rolls right now, we'd have to put it on. And again, I get approached about at least once a year with somebody who says, let's do this with it, but we want to be selective of what we want to see at that end of Court Street. So.
Part of what you're referring to is the certified local government of historic preservation, which we're one of 62 cities in the state of Ohio that has been designated as such. And it works, as I understand it, it fits with our historic uptown overlay within that.
Thank you. And Auditor Heck, did we want to comment?
Just one quick comment. The mayor touched on this a little bit, but I would think the main reason for doing this after 10-plus years would be that the costs for these improvements would have changed from that long ago.
And this would offer us a more accurate understanding of what needs to be fixed and how much it would cost.
Yeah.
And this amount, again, for tonight was?
7,000.
7,000, thank you.
That was a quote given by one of the engineers firms, architectural firms. They were one of the ones who evaluated previously, so they'd be doing an update and another walkthrough. I've already talked to our lands and buildings about arranging that, as well as probably tweaking the bid specs that they put together and see what see how it shifts from what we're trying to do in terms of retention of the place, or stabilization versus designs on it, So we'll see.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions or comments from the community? We do have a motion and a second for ordinance 8514. All those in favor of ordinance 8514, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 8614, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an agreement with the Board of Athens County Commissioners to extend sanitary sewer collection services to unincorporated portions of the county. And this is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adopt 8614.
Second.
This has been a long process to determine our requirements to have the county tie into our sewer collection services. This is the result of about a year and a half of negotiations, sometimes very painful, about what our considerations and responsibilities that we see the county following in order to hook into our collection service. Once this is passed, it will be then up to the county to sell the plan and to design and to fund the plan. So once this passes, if it passes tonight, pretty much our job in the negotiations and the planning process will have been completed, and then it will be up to the county to follow through. So, question?
Any questions or comments?
It's just, as I say, our concern, of course, is that extension of our sewer system outside the city limits means we're giving services out there. It's one of the biggest leverage we have for annexation. This is essentially going towards the Radford Road area. And tell you the truth, just when I said annexation, there's a bunch of people who just stopped listening right now. And they're panicking that we'll annex them. But the fact is that it'd be impractical to annex that wide swath, but not without having to at least quadruple all our fire and police and all the other services. Our concerns, of course, was it's in an unincorporated area and unzoned, and how to put the checks and balances on in terms of development there. We have subdivision jurisdiction in terms of 3-mile limit, but other than that, there are very few checks and balances out there except the health department, and we have fixed it at a certain number of taps and a certain amount of gallons, millions of gallons per day of sewage. We'll be metering that at 3 different points. Again, it's up to the county commissions to come up with a plan. They've been working on this for many years, more than I don't even know how many years, except it's been tossed around for quite some time. And it behooves us to have that area healthy and safe, just because it is a septic system area that's at its Well, yeah, failing would be one term, I guess, but at the same time, it is getting aged, and the rules have changed for septic systems now, that you just can't just plug one in like you used to. So we're trying to actually work regionally for the betterment, and eventually this would drain into the Hocking and affect us. So we're trying to get ahead of that, and they've got their job once you approve this. And again, we're a region, we're just not standing alone by ourselves.
I'd like to also point out that it's not a sewer system that's going to be, for build-out out there. And it's as kind of a photo that's taken now, and that's what we're looking at. And that one of our chief concerns was economic flight of businesses and companies out to this area. And I think that working with the county, we have addressed these issues for the city. Any further development or expansion of the sewer system would require a new negotiation and memorandum of understanding through another process. So this is basically trying to deal with the environmental problems that are out there as it stands today.
I would also point out that in the contract or the agreement we're putting together, that they have a percentage of industry that they can put out there. I think it's 1%, and it mimics what's out there now in terms of there's a little bit of play for extra taps, but not a lot. I think commercial is also in the balance too, what percentage. Part of the concern, of course, is the flight outside of our business going out to that region, and therefore losing tax base. Again, I look at it as the next, to expand past those number of taps and not gallons, millions of gallons of flow, which we have the capacity to do as it stands now. Will be another negotiation for either, depending on how fast this goes, because I don't know, they have to get all their ducks in a row and convince everybody out there. It may take years, so therefore another administration may be involved, another set of council be involved, and I would like the minutes to reflect, at least they should be aware of what our issues were, which were the stampede out there in terms of residents as well as businesses, that's the negotiation with an eye towards that impact for the long term.
Thank you, Mayor Wall. I too would like to echo my support for this this ordinance. I think Member Fall nailed it, and it's something I also had heard our Public Works Director, Andy Stone, mention, which is this is a huge environmental wellness, health, safety issue, and enhancing that spectrum. So I think, again, that's huge, and want to offer my support for that. Or perhaps.
I too want to echo my support for this. I've spoken to several individuals who live off of Radford Road and down in that area, and they're very appreciative that this could be a possibility. They're not, obviously, within the city of Athens and constituents, but regardless, we're talking about quality of life changes to our lives. People are happy with the notion of going off septic and to be able to tap in someday as this moves through.
Mayor Wall.
And again, you're making it sound rosy, but the fact is it still has to be sold by the county commissioners for people who have either never paid a utility bill before, much less a tap fee, or have just paid for a new septic system and therefore would not really want to invest in have just finished investing in their lot. And again, it is the major hammer. If you talk about annexation needs, most of the time it's fire, water, police, and sewer. And, the other three services are out there in some other form, whether it's the deputy or the volunteer fire department or LEAX or Tucker's Plain or Borough as water systems that we're surrounded with. But at the same time, it's a balance. I am not as enthusiastic because I'm aware of the possible problems that could occur in this. But the fact is, I think in the spirit of trying to maintain a healthy area, and I say area being Athens and Athens County and City, I think it's worthwhile doing, at least putting out that agreement.
I think that's an excellent point as a roundup, is that we do live in a region and we do live in an area, and we can't just isolate ourselves right here in the city, that everybody's situation affects everybody else. That's a good point.
Thank you, Mayor Pappy. Any other questions or comments? Community input? We do have a motion and a second for ordinance 8614. All those in favor of the ordinance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 8814, an ordinance amending ordinance 106-06, granting variances from the Athens City subdivision regulations for property located outside the corporate limits but within the 3-mile jurisdiction to allow a minor lot split, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 8814.
Second?
This is kind of housekeeping in most aspects. As Mayor Weil has said, that we have this jurisdiction, planning jurisdiction out to 3 miles. That's why these things come before us in accordance to the subdivision regulations. This particular one is granting variances from the original ordinance that allowed for lot split and definition of these lots. Basically, it's to replicate what is actually out in the field. They don't need as much of a driveway to get back to a flag lot, so we're changing it to represent what's actually going on out there. Exciting.
Mayor Weil.
Essentially, these non-conforming lots, they were split off, as you say, from 10606 ordinance. It's a flag lot, which is basically frontage is small in the front and wides on the back. Both lots, I believe, have structures on them. You should have some maps on it as well, but what you're seeing is that the original access to the back lot was never really fully utilized because there was a fence there, I believe. And as a result, they just want to make that fence legally on the frontage on the other property that it belongs to. And again, you have at least, 3 variances on this? 3 variances. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments? Community input? We have a motion and a second for ordinance 8814. All those in favor of the ordinance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 9014, an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 29, Housing Regulations, Chapter 29.12, Premises Conditions, Sections 29.12.01, Sanitary Requirements, and 29.12.02, Citation, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is one of several things we're going to talk about trash tonight. I move that we adopt 9014.
Second?
This is pretty straightforward. It's updating, I suppose, some of the other ordinances. It's kind of updating definitions about sanitary requirements to including broken trash bags, loose garbage, overflowing containers, or accumulation of excess waste in a storage area, to help to address some of the issues that have been brought before council for numerous years to keep areas safe and healthy when it comes to garbage. It also increases the fines for basically having loose, strewn about garbage upon your property.
Do you have, thank you, do you have the data on the,
We'll talk about the data on the next
no,
one.
I'm sorry, I mean, the amount of the fine increase?
Oh, it's going like from 20 to 50.
Thank you.
That's kind of what that's the general gist of 20 to 50. So.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this ordinance? I would like to express my support for this ordinance as well. I believe the fine fee raise increase is necessary and valid. I do think that there is a necessity for accountability in our community, so I want to support that. Any other questions or comments? Any input from the community on the fine increase and other information on this ordinance? Okay, we have a motion and a second on ordinance 9014. All those in favor of the ordinance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 9114, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 5, Chapter 5.02, Garbage and Rubbish, Section 502.11, Uncollected Rubbish and Refuse Nuisance. Introduced again by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 9114. This is basically a housekeeping ordinance. The code enforcement, head of code enforcement, identified an area where the ordinance, the code language wasn't using the correct citation for another code section within the ordinance of 502.1, so it's going to be changed from, I am identifying 29.13.01D, which is currently in the code as a citation, to 29.12.02. Basically updating it and changing the numbers.
Thank you, Member Fall. Questions or comments? So we have a motion and a second for ordinance 9114. All those in favor of the ordinance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 9214, an ordinance declaring canine equipment no longer needed for an municipal purpose and authorizing the mayor to donate same equipment to the Athens County Sheriff's Office, introduced by Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 9214.
Second.
And this is our, we had a canine program with our city police department. That person has retired, and we will no longer be having that program through the city department. So we're donating, and the dog retired at the same time that the police person did, and we no longer have a need for the equipment, so that's why we're retiring the equipment and donating it to the Athens County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Nisley. Any questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second for ordinance 9214. All those in favor of the ordinance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 9514, an ordinance declaring the fire pumper truck no longer needed for a municipal purpose. And this, again, is introduced by Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 9514.
Second.
And the audience may have heard our earlier discussions. We're in the midst of making the final arrangements and borrowing money for purchase of a new pumper truck. And we will be disposing of the old pumper truck. City no longer using it as a fixed asset, and so we need to move this ordinance through City Council to dispose of it.
Thank you, Member Nisley. Any questions or comments on ordinance 9514? Mayor, anything?
No.
We have a motion and a second for the ordinance. All those in favor of the ordinance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance has been adopted. Moving on to ordinances for second reading. So we will not be voting on these ordinances. They'll be read, but there is still an opportunity for public comment. Likewise, if you're interested in comment, you may step to the podium. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and likewise, we probably can benefit from not reiterating the same comments. So if you have a comment that someone else has already made, we probably don't need to spend too much time on it. Ordinance 8914, an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 5, Public Utilities, Chapter 5.02, Garbage and Rubbish, Section 5.02.03, Preparation and Storage. This was introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know that there's several people here tonight to talk about this. We also have several letters that people wanted us to read into the record for this evening. I'd like to just open it up with a brief comment. I think that the last couple weeks when people have been getting warnings, it has lent some confusion to this whole discussion. People think that all of a sudden council had passed some kind of new garbage storage ordinance and put it into the code because all of a sudden they were hearing about garbage storage and then they were getting warnings. And this is not what happened. The in order to get baseline data, the administration decided to go out and do a clean sweep, if you want to use some kind of how many people are out there not in line with the present code that has been within the Athens City Code since at least 2005. So they went out and looked at people's storage methods and issued warnings. I think that in order to get baseline data, the warnings didn't necessarily need to go out. Could have just gone and collected data, which is a reasonable thing. And this was not, I would have liked to get a little different data to have them look at a broader range than just the code warnings that they did give. I think that it's confusing for people right now because we are talking about storage opportunities and trying to update the Chapter 5.02. I think that some of the things that went on during the warning season, for want of a better word, does show that how much the update that we need of certain types of storage options, specifically warning, the waiver system, because I know several people were quite concerned about the warnings that they got. So that's, I think what probably would make most sense is to have public comment so we can all listen to what's, besides the emails and such that we've been getting over the last couple weeks. And then I have some questions about the data that is being presented to us this evening, just some quick, and then we can decide where we want to go on from there. So, you want to? Here, would you like? There's a couple letters, and then we'll open it up for public comment, and then council can do it. And administration.
Thank you, Member Fall. We do have two
Letters that were in our mailboxes from residents of Athens. Likewise, we've received numerous emails and phone calls. This particular letter in support is from Linda Phillips, 171 North Congress Street. I'm writing an email letter to express my support for the continued effort to corral our trash storage problem. As this letter is read, please view the pictures of various screened and unscreened situations. I don't know if we have access to those. Or,
They have it. I don't know whether, you might as well read it.
The original code, 5.02.03, was passed in 2005 and since that time was never enforced. Current council members are attempting to make the ordinance language more palatable with use of the word, quote, screened, unquote, and with a waiver process for hardship cases. I applaud your efforts and think it magnanimous of you to make it easier for the residents of Athens to fall into compliance. Screened is defined as something that shelters, protects, or hides as a growth of trees, shrubs, plants, a protective formation, something that covers or disguises. I think that most people can find a way to incorporate some type of screening on their property. The recent rash of citations was to gauge compliance with the original ordinance that was never enforced. Therefore, it did take a great deal of, quote, manpower to evaluate each property. The need for that, quote, manpower will be greatly reduced as we all do our part and the new language is instituted. In addition, the code office does yearly inspections on at least 65% of the current residents in the city, and the new language could be in their checklist of things to evaluate on each property and should take no more than a few seconds per property as the officers are already out of their vehicles to inspect. Other residents could be viewed yearly as the current litter enforcement officer drives the streets. I do not think asking that we as a community have a clean view shed is a Stepford, quote, approach, but rather a raising of the bar for what our community standard should be. And then citizen Karen Don, 158 North Congress Street. Have you ever traveled to another city or state and upon returning home to Athens become suddenly aware of how dirty, unkept, and let's face it, slovenly our community looks? In addition to all the litter strewn about, there's something decidedly unattractive about trash and recycling bins stacked in view against the house or garage, or worse, lying at curbside. It's a bit like the disappointment of entering a beautiful bedroom only to see a rumpled unmade bed. I think a little research into how other cities regulate the storage of trash cans would reveal laws similar to what is actually on the books in Athens. Nothing overly stringent, but neither are their policies subject to interpretation. In a recent exchange of emails about this topic among the Anna neighbors, someone pointed out that she once lived in University Heights near Cleveland, where there, too, trash cans had to be stored out of sight. Many Athens residents, including young adults, aka students who reside among us, are from other towns and cities that require placement of trash cans away from view. I don't believe it is an imposition at all to expect them to do the same in our town. I've recently returned from Billings, Montana, where I couldn't help but notice how unbelievably neat the neighborhoods are. I actually searched for so much as a glimpse of a garbage bin as I walked and drove around town, but nary a one did I see except for the full ones waiting at curbside for pickup. Since I'm guessing not every resident of Billings is a neatnik who just loves dragging an empty garbage can back from the curb every week and storing it out of sight, do you suppose there's a strictly enforced policy regarding trash cans even way out in Montana? And by the way, that town really looks great, so why not Athens? Thank you. Karen Dunn. And again, I know we've received other emails and input and phone calls. I know the clerk's phone has been, messages have been left there as well. We are hearing that. We want to continue to hear input and feedback. We have 2 more weeks, correct, for final reading, and then this evening we will welcome comment as well. Mayor Weil?
You have the date in front of you. I think about 65% of the city has been viewed, looked at. I believe that's what it says in the first column, percentage completed by sector. You can see the University Station is not covered. I guess they haven't gotten to that. After that, 38% on the west side has been looked at. It was an opportunity where we're between the rental schedule inspections, so I tasked them to actually stop doing rental inspections while they redo the schedule and take 3 weeks to look at this. Again, for data collection is one. The other thing, of course, is that this is what you want to happen, if I understand correctly. The only difference is I'm trying to interpret the law the way you want to set it up right now. And again, I thank you for putting the waivers back in, but again, there's still a process to determine what constitutes a legitimate waiver. I also point out, and I think you've seen the sheds out there, I'm calling trash pantries these days. Some of them are not that much more attractive than what you're talking about in terms of screening or the trash cans themselves. The warnings are just warnings. I told them to actually do the citations, look at them, take the pictures, do everything up to the point. It would be no different than if you pass the ordinance next reading. I'm trying to remember where you put in the January 1st enforcement date on it, but that's it. Basically, we'd be doing this thing in January at this point. The only difference is that we put a lot of PR into it. We call people up. We put a banner on a Goodyear blimp to go over the city and say, watch your garbage or something like that. But a warning's just as good. And it gives me the practice of what it would take to enforce it. It will be a difficult thing. If you look at it, total violation percentage is 37.4% of what's been collected and looked at. So therefore, and essentially you look at the breakdown, it's pretty much random. If you really want to do more data analysis, you can always compare. I can get you the spreadsheets for the violations. Probably you can look at the rental spreadsheets on the city website. So what are you looking at here? Well, it's going to be a sea change. It probably will be for the better. It's also going to probably be a hardship for some people, but that's no different than any other sea change we're going to try making. And again, I'm trying to get ahead of your ordinance. This is what you want, right? Is that what I'm hearing? The only difference is that the fines now, if we ever did them, would be $20 versus $50. And of course, this is just was made aware of what's going to come ahead as reading number 3 occurs. It's as simple as that.
So, Mayor, I'm sorry for interrupting. If I'm understanding your data collection correctly, you're indicating that 37.4% of the homes that have been covered by this current check with our current ordinance on the books are not in compliance.
Yes, according to the interpretation you wish me to follow. Again, most of the time we were saying, okay, what is it? Out of sight, behind the front line. We've been saying, okay, it's pretty difficult to get it out of sight in some cases. We'll give them a pass on that. So therefore, administratively, we're going to follow the law. We're being robots. That's what you're seeing here. We're not really being robots because we haven't cited anybody yet. The warning should be an idea that there's something that needs to be done. I liken it to the fact that, 40 years ago, we used to burn leaves in the city. It was a Norman Rockwell moment, the smell of leaves burning in the fall. We don't do that anymore. Imagine the hardship for some people right now who said, I miss those burning leaves. At the same time, it will be a change, I hope for the better. I'm not in disagreement with you. I have a little problem with how to structure a waiver so people have problems in terms of where to put it, particularly across corners, disabilities. How do we measure these things? I know some people who collect hang tags saying I'm disabled, and they believe they're owed that, and therefore they can park where they want. I know there's checks and balances out there on some level, but how do you vet all those? So at this point, we're starting. This is data collection. This is rebooting the interpretation as instructed by legislation. That's where we are.
There's some of the things, you went to go and do it according to the 2005 code, and that's the only thing that you can do. We're talking about different language and trying to change some of the language so that it's not as much of an interpretation by code that needs to be. But that's not what these warnings were. And if you were doing it based on what we're talking about, then they're not really warnings. They're some kind of if in the future sort of scenario, which are two different things.
What is the difference between out of sight and without of sight? As far as I know, this is out of sight. The present code is out of sight. Is there a difference between out of sight and out of sight?
Well,
out of sight. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think that we need to be very careful about trying to separate what we're trying to do with new wording that's trying to tighten language up and to address some of these issues, because obviously they've been issues, because if it hasn't been enforced, my contention is if it had been enforced, somewhat during the last few years, you probably wouldn't have 37% rate. You probably have 10% rate, which probably, if you look around at certain types of code, that's probably a normal warning rate. But all of a sudden, out of the blue, without any sort of education, the warnings went out. But if you did we're going to do a clean sweep of Athens next week, and our code officers are going out looking at your garbage cans, this is kind of, what the code says, and this is what we're looking for, you probably would have gotten less too. And so I think that we need to make sure that we're talking about, the data is collecting data is important, but we need to, these people who got warnings would still get a warning in January, even if the new language doesn't pass, because there is no waiver system. So those people who were identified to us, who've called about needing a waiver, wouldn't have access to the waiver system. Now, how that's going to work in the paperwork, that's, working out with being able to do it. But I think that we need to, make sure that we are talking about, apples and oranges here, and I think
what is the difference that you're talking about? The fact that it does in January, or the fact that it doesn't have enough publicity, or the fact that I did it last week when I had the opportunity to take out the code enforcements off their rental examinations, inspections? I mean, again, this is rolling right along. So what do you...
Yeah, but the thing is that we haven't passed anything. So it's not, we're not looking at...
And the difference between the passage of behind the front setback out of sight versus out of sight.
Well, the thing is also, according to the analysis, we don't know whether it was the cans were out of sight, the cans were not behind the front setback, or they weren't behind, why it changed, why they were warned, which is what I would have probably liked to do. But, I think that baseline information is important, and the question before council, in order to make the regulation and the code easier to understand, not as hard to go out and enforce for a code enforcement officer, And to allow for extenuating or hardship circumstances, those are the sort of things that what we're trying to do, because the code hasn't worked up to now. My contention is having a code that's not enforced is not a good idea. That's not good policy, and that's not good legislation. So
We do have a few pictures, Mayor Weil, if you would like to see, of people who were cited for something that was very minor.
Minor?
Well, I
So
mean-
you want me to interpret it again?
No,
Oh.
I'm just saying fair and reasonable.
Okay, the copy I have of the code violation thing says section 50203. So what is 50203? 50203 says, what do we got here? No person shall have waste in it. Let's see. All solid waste shall be kept in containers stored out of view from the street behind the front edge, except when the containers are at this curbside pickup. So
That's the
present code.
Right.
Okay, so out of sight, behind the front edge. That's the violation. If you want to break that down to two sections of code, behind the front edge and out of sight, we can actually do that and cite it in a violation or a warning, be more specific. I guess we could always just have them sign out that particular sentence, but I don't know if that's, how hard do you want to parse the data here? If it's in sight, I don't know when it would be out of sight in the front of the setback, I guess. I'm trying to think how that looks. I think the dialogue I had is if you have a pumpkin, right? Yeah, you build a pumpkin in there and you put your garbage in the pumpkin, it looks like a pumpkin for Halloween, but it's, it's out of sight, or is it in front setback? Which is it? So, again, I don't see this any different than what you plan to put in legislation. You're asking me to do something like this. You are asking me to reinterpret the code that we've been doing it, and we have. The violations are not violations, they're warnings, they would occur. I fully expect 37% of the people to be that because it is a sea change. I don't see why we should be upset by that because it is new and different. And from my point of view, it will probably end up with a better city.
But it's not a new and different code. The code has been on the books.
Yes, it has.
So,
And you've brought it to my attention, citizens have brought to my attention that I actually said I'd do that, and I am doing it.
Okay.
So I'm fulfilling my campaign promises from many years ago. Aren't you happy?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor.
Are we having committee meeting yet?
Thank you. I do want
Okay.
to make sure that we open the floor to committee members, to community members that have taken time this evening to share comments regarding this issue. So if you wish to speak on this particular issue, please approach the podium, and you're granted roughly 3 minutes. Please also sign in and identify where you reside. Thank you.
My name is Bernard Debatin. I'm a resident of Athens. I live on 67 North Avenue. There's nothing to sign in here, so I can't do that. Oh, I am signing. Oh, that's right. I sent a letter to the council members because I was among those who got a citation or warning. I also sent in a picture. I don't know if you have that. It would be nice to put it up if you happen to have that. Just to give you an example of how in sight or not in sight is actually, in fact, a question of interpretation and not something that is totally clear-cut. So if you could put this...
I don't know if they have your specific lot or...
But I can also explain it to you. So first of all, I want to say I would be really happy if the city of Athens were using the code enforcement for issues that are maybe a little bit more relevant, such as snow removal at times when kids are supposed to take the bus and there is no snow removal. But that's a different issue. What I am concerned about is that this code and the way how it was interpreted in these warnings seems to be so broad that it includes everything from people who really don't care, and I do agree we have a trash problem in Athens, quite obviously. You just need to go around in some neighborhoods and you see that that is a problem. But on the other hand, we also have people who just happen to put their trash cans in their backyard somewhere. And in fact, if you were to be able to put up the picture that you apparently can't put up, you would see an example of that, which is in my backyard, where we got a warning because of a visible trash can. Yes, it was visible, but really only if you squint really hard or if you use binoculars. And that is the question of what means actually something being in sight. It's not that easy, because some people may have really long parcels and the trash can be at the very end. I can put my trash can really at the very end of our pretty long parcel, and you can still, if you want to, with some help of, let's say, some even better binoculars, see that there is a trash can. So I think this is not very reasonable. This goes to the point of how do we write code that is enforceable, meaningful, and at the same time also not putting an undue burden on citizens. This code as it is right now, in my opinion, doesn't address the real issue, and that is that people leave out their trash cans from Monday to Monday or from Tuesday to Tuesday, I mean the next week each time. In other words, don't put it ever back. That we have people who leave their recycling containers on the front and who leave their trash on the front. That is the real problem. I do not believe that we have a problem with people putting their trash cans back into their backyard. And this undifferentiated collection of data is actually absolutely useless, because what you collected there is not addressing the real issue. What you collected is a very strange interpretation of a probably not very well-written code that ended up with basically with no way to tell, are you talking about people who have an irresponsible and unneighborly way of dealing with their trash, or are you dealing with people who do what everybody does, and that, or normally everybody does, and that is they put their trash cans somewhere in the back so that they are out of sight. Out of sight meaning in a reasonable way. Like any law, here too, the principle of proportionality should actually be applied. And I know that I'm happy that Patrick Lang is back. He is probably familiar with that principle. That is a very basic principle of law writing, and it means that you should have a proportional and adequate way of the violation that you define and the way how it is being applied and what it actually refers to. We have a law or an ordinance that is really badly or ill-defined because it allows exactly for the kind of semantic strange interpretations that we heard earlier from you, where sight equals sight. I'm probably out of time.
Thank you, Bernard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Yeah.
Some other amendments on this, we just permission.
Further comments? Community members, yeah.
Yeah. Patty Stokes, and I'm married to that guy, so I don't know if this even counts as separate testimony. I will sign on to what he said, but I will say also, sweetheart, I think that you can actually, I mean, you can see it from the road. It is a very literal interpretation, a very literal reading of it. In our case, it was back probably 5 car lengths from the street. And if you think about the Near East neighborhood and the way a lot of those lots are configured, you've got long driveways, flat lots, so you don't have a hill to hide anything behind. You don't even have room for much shrubbery along the sides of the buildings. So for instance, a certain judge who lives across the street from me on Morris got cited. The doctor and professor who live across the street from me got cited. I'm not saying that they should be exempt because they're professional people or in charge of enforcing the laws, simply because that this is the way that the things are laid out there. For us, I think there would be one point out of sight. If you put it directly behind the house, we've already got one trash can and the recycling snugged up against the back. But we have a little notch in next to our back porch. Not everybody has that in their neighborhood. And so it could mean, you know, putting it out of sight means putting it right at the base of your back porch, which is not so nice either if you want to sit and enjoy your porch. Having it alongside the driveway, as probably the majority of people do. I mean, I walked around, I'm sure it's in excess of 50% that got the notices in my particular part of town. Having it next to the house is the least noxious thing to do, as far back as possible away from the curb. Again, these are cases where you're talking about 60 to 80 feet back probably. And it seems to me that one way to reduce the amount of red tape involved with the waiver system, which, you know, in general I would fully support, but maybe you can, you know, reduce the red tape by saying, okay, if it's back a certain distance from the street, and it would have to be considerable distance. I'm not talking 10 feet. I'm not talking just barely tucked behind the front of the house. But depending on the situation, that might be the only reasonable way to deal with it, without ending up with indeed 30% of the city being in a situation where they're applying for waivers. And I guess one other way to streamline that would be to say, if you do in fact have a disability sticker, I have to strenuously disagree. Some people maybe try to play the system. The problem is you can't tell by looking at somebody if they have a disability or not. And so I think that that is an area where you'd have to defer to the judgment of the doctors who have issued a sticker. If somebody's got a parking sticker, odds are good that they've got something legit going on. And it would be demeaning and I think, a double hardship to deny that in those cases. Okay, that's all I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other community comments? Likewise, I want to acknowledge our timer isn't working, so I'll be using the fancy gizmo here, known as an iPhone.
Okay. Yeah, just,
I'll give you a little heads up.
Just sign in.
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
And I won't start your time until...
My name is Sarah Nelson, and I live on 18 Maple Street. I'm a homeowner on the west side, and I have a couple of oppositions to this. One of the problems is kind of the, if we all lived in this flat community where every house was right in a row, and we had driveways, and we had garages, and we had everything, that would be one thing. But one of the things that makes Athens really unique is that it's not a cookie cutter sort of a town, and especially on the west side, and I know on the north end of town and around town, the houses aren't laid out like that. There aren't garages at all, or they're very far at the back of the property. These houses are on hillsides. There's old steps leading up to it. There's a number of structural issues that would make it difficult, even just to bring a garbage can to the curb and back, which we all try to do, but then try to put it in a different place that's completely obscured from view of the street. There's definitely some limitations to that. And again, that's, just as far as issues to kind of be considering, that's something that, I don't have a garage, I can tuck it neatly under, and kind of additionally, like when I walk down the street, if I see a garbage can, it doesn't bother me. I mean, if the garbage cans are splayed across the sidewalk and there's garbage falling out of them, certainly, but if I can see somebody's garbage can that's next to an otherwise nice-looking property, that's not something personally that bothers me. And I can't speak for anybody else, but that's something that doesn't personally bother me. And the other point I kind of just want to make is that although, definitely, especially we see in our student neighborhoods, a lot of problems with trash and with untidiness, there's a lot of adults in Athens who are not students, who maybe have never even been students at OU, who are choosing to make a home here. I'm one of, on my street, there's 3 of us in a row who are homeowners, who are professionals, in our 30s, who are choosing to make a home in Athens and pay taxes here. And even though we're young, we're not messy and making a big mess, but maybe we also don't care as much if somebody else, we can see their garbage can from the street. So I just kind of wanted to speak for some of those people who fall into that middle demographic there. And that's all I wanted to say. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Sure. Please approach.
My name is Joel Bitters. I live at 12 Briarwood. I was born and raised here. I've lived here for over 60 years. I was working out of state. My wife returned home from a very nice vacation without me and found a citation. I don't care what you call it. I should actually give this to the law director.
I have nothing to do with that.
I'm in violation.
My office has nothing at all to do with that. Even though they helpfully mentioned my office on that, I'm told.
Yeah.
I actually haven't seen one of those.
As of the 14th. So it was a warning or a survey or something is not what is jiving with what I received. I'd be very interested in the waiver situation because my house
I think I have your picture.
2 different streets.
Yeah.
What's the front?
Yeah.
Tell me which, is this the front? Is that the front? Or the other 2 sides of the front if you're looking from Columbia Avenue? Where do I put a garbage can?
Sure.
The garbage cans that I put there 26 years ago when I moved into the house are in exactly the same spot they've been for the last 22 years. and I never got a citation before. So I think we all agree cleaning up garbage is a good idea, but I kind of think the way that we're going about this, both from the council and the city's standpoint, is a bit of a disservice to those of us who live our lives here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if I
Sure.
might expand on that,
Sure.
since my name was invoked and rightfully so there, I'm going to do my best to maintain my composure as I give a brief statement about this, but I understand that these citations, or whatever we're calling them, that went out, did make mention on them that you referred to my office for prosecution. That was the first I had heard of it, was after someone had gotten one of these citations. I certainly didn't authorize anyone to make that sort of assertion, and I certainly have no intention, as long as I'm law director, of following up on any of those. So it sounds like a lot of folks were certainly shocked and surprised to get what appears to be a citation that talked about being referred to the law director's office for prosecution, and just wanting to reassure folks that that's not going to be the case.
Thank you.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Law Director Lang. Further comments, please, Ms. Krasinski.
Hello, my name is Joan Krasinski, 56 Mound Street. I just had a brief thing to say, but I would like to address this to council, but also the people that spoke tonight that had issues with their citations. Back in 2002, when this ordinance was rewritten and out of sight was added into the current ordinance, which says out of sight behind the front corner of the house. It just used to say behind the front corner of the house. The administration at the time charged the code office, or the code office charged itself, I can't quite remember, to go out and do just what the administration is doing now on a rampage and start going out every morning. Well, I was one of those people, and I would like to say it's approximately 100 feet from behind my house to the top of the hill that I have to drag the trash can up and carry the recycling things up. And I had them on my front porch, but I cut the tree down and you could see them. And so all I want to say is I have gotten used to it. It's behind the house. It works for me. And I think that is the idea of what the council is trying to do, to give people time to adjust. One of my neighbors actually went out and bought this cute little gray thing that covers both his trash can and his recycling right along the side of his house. So, cover it up or move it to the back of the house. I mean, so this is 2014, so it's taken me 10 years, and I actually am going to lug it up the hill tonight so my trash can go out. And tomorrow, I'll put it back behind my house. The other thing I'd like to say is I'd like to read something that was published in the Student Off-Campus Monthly that went out in August to all of the students. One of the CAs came through our neighborhood and passed out information, gave me a copy of this. And on the page about recycling tips, trash, and living sustainably, they all kind of are tied together. It states, remember, it says this is a reminder, after your trash recycling has been picked up, it's your responsibility to place empty bins out of sight of the street before dark on trash day. Please do your part to keep our city clean. So, if University Student Services is telling the students to do this, then, and this was August, then I think that we're catching up here with this ordinance, and I truly support it. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments?
We do have pictures to show. Oh, you brought in a stick for pictures? Can you put pictures? Thank you.
We may be,
There you go.
thank you.
So I think if you just run through these, there's somebody who put up a screen, correct? Just keep running it through. This is obviously probably not acceptable to maybe most people. That obviously is behind something on the porch. You can still see it. Unacceptable. There was an old stove. Unacceptable. Maybe. This is the current ordinance. This is the gentleman who came up. You can barely see there next to his car a red recycling. I would say where it's placed is acceptable, but obviously a code officer said it wasn't. But I think they're doing their best. This is behind a house on the side. This person was ingenious. They put up a screen, but they also got a warning because guess what? A little bit was showing there. But I thought that was an ingenious way to screen. It's on a carport. This is pretty unsightly. Maybe that's one of the things we're trying to improve upon. I think this is pretty unsightly. These have been this way for the entire time that the current ordinance has been written, entire time. Front of the house. There's a bush somebody planted. I think the trash cans are behind that bush. You don't see them in the street. This is really hard, but I believe this person got cited kind of really hard to see. But I think it's screened, but maybe not. You can see it. I don't know. I think it's screened. This is obviously out in view. This is fairly screened. This is somebody who drags it up a hill and is out of sight. Here's a rental unit with the screen, white fence. Here's a rental unit with a fence. Not really screened. Here's two brand new rental units. Well, they were fixed up. All the trash is behind the back of the house. Out of sight. This is screened. There's bushes here. That's maybe up for debate because those bushes may lose their leaves and then it is going to be exposed. But that's an idea of a bush. Screening it. Does anybody find that acceptable? These people have not been cited since 2005. Is that acceptable? I think we get the idea.
Thank you. Are there any other community members that would like to speak on this issue that's up for second reading?
Hi, my name is Kathleen Sullivan. I live on Woodward Avenue. Thank you. I live on Woodward Avenue, and I'm in the political science department, and for a living, I actually research garbage collection in the progressive era, so I'm fascinated by this. And I have some questions for the mayor. I guess I'm wondering, why has the existing code not been enforced for all these years? Why is it being so strictly enforced now? And I guess, Mayor, I really want to know what's the deal with the reluctance to interpret the law with reason, as a reasonable person would, for neighbors? So I guess I'm as a citizen and a voter who votes for you, I'm really, really curious. Thank you.
We just had a photo montage of what's acceptable and not acceptable through the eyes of Councilmember Pappy. Administratively, we've given some leeway. I think the first speaker talked about how theirs is in sight, but way back there. The present code we're talking about, which is in second reading, 08914, has struck out behind the front edge of the house and has just kept out of view. Okay, so this is the trending legislation right now. I'm glad to see they put the waiver back in, the structure for that, or at least keeping it in. Interpretation will be up to interpretation. Again, it comes down to aesthetics. I mean, if all these garbage cans were hot pink, they'd be more noticeable, like the recycle bins. So when you say, why is strict interpretation? It's I've been asked to reevaluate what we've been doing, so I am, and here we are.
I see you are, yep.
Okay, is that a problem?
Well, and
It's-
let me interrupt.
it's
Let me interrupt just
visible.
briefly for the moment
Yeah.
because we're not in committee meeting, and I
I know.
apologize for interrupting. But we welcome comments, but we're not having a discussion, debate at the moment. Any other comments from the community that'd like to offer input about the ordinance? If not, moving on. Thank you, everyone. Ordinance 9814, again, this is second reading. An ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 29, Housing Regulations, Chapter 29.03, Rental Dwellings and Housing Permit, Section 29.03.07, Expirations and Renewals. And this was introduced by Councilmember Patterson. Ordinance 9914, an ordinance amending Ordinance 8313, establishing fees as required by the Athens City Code, and this was, as well was introduced by Councilmember Patterson.
Mr. President, for this particular ordinance, unfortunately, we're going to have to amend this once again, thanks to the eagle eye of our clerk of council who caught this and brought it to my attention. So unfortunately, this will go back to first reading again. But it was an oversight because there's several sections under the 83-13 ordinance to where section 5.02.03 lists first, second, third, fourth, and fifth offenses, which had $20, $40, $60, $80, and $100. Those are changing to $50 for the first offense, $75 for the second offense, $100 for the third offense, $125 for the fourth offense, and $150 for the fifth offense on that. The same holds true for section 13.07.07, citation for litter violation. And I believe there's one other location. It was section 29.12.02, which is citation for sanitary violation. Again, those two latter ones that I just mentioned also had the old amounts, so they too will go up to $50 first offense, $75 for second offense, $100 third offense, $125 for fourth, and $150 for the fifth offense. So therefore, amendments are needed for that piece of legislation. I also want to point out, because I didn't mention this in the detail that I think was warranted, the original amendment to that ordinance, which was section 29.03.08, rental permit fee, that those fees are going up, two of them by $10. The remainder sections of that particular piece, it's going up by $5. But the last time this legislation was changed was in 2005. So these are minimal increases in order to keep up with the actual time it takes to process the rental permit fees. I think the time before that, it jumped up by quite a bit back in 2005. So these are small increases. So I wanted to point that out. So this is just going forward once again as first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson.
I think that's a motion.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make a motion to amend ordinance 9914.
Second.
Thank you.
So we heard from Member Patterson at length about this ordinance and the need to change it. Mayor Weil also has a comment before we vote on amending.
Just to double check, I know we need to check the fee levels, but also to make sure the citations match up with the other citations. If I look at 9014 here, I think the citation there talks about 130706. The one over here talks about 130707. So it may just be a clerical shift. But I don't have the code in front of me right now, but I'm looking at a little bit of a difference there. So we probably want to go through all those changes that you just are proposing and make sure that section numbers haven't shifted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Member Patterson. The clerk has indicated that she is likely indicating it's a clerical issue, right?
It's possible.
Looking into it.
I don't know, I was just looking at them, and they've made, I think section 5 matches up. 13 looks a little off, and I don't have section 29 in front of me to say one way or the other.
So when we read it, it'll be.
Okay, that's all.
So we have a motion to amend the ordinance and a second. All those in favor of amending the ordinance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance has been amended, and now, correct me if I'm wrong, that is considered first reading.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any desire to, Member Patterson, to move forward any more with this or no? Okay,
No, Mr. President.
thank you. Ordinance 100-14, an ordinance amending ordinance 140-13, authorizing the Service Safety Director to suspend temporarily the fee for parking at metered spaces in the municipal parking garage. And this was introduced by Councilmember Pappy. Any comments or questions on this? Ordinance 101-14, an ordinance amending ordinance 141-13, suspending Athens City Code Section 7.05.03, continuous parking in the same location from Monday, December 15th, 2014 until midnight on Friday, January 2nd, 2015, introduced by Councilmember Pappy. Again, these are just second ordinance. Any questions or comments? Okay, moving on to ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 104-14, an ordinance amending the 2014 appropriation ordinance and authorizing the auditor to make an interfund transfer, and this is introduced by Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the rules for ordinance 104-14.
Second.
And the purpose of this being that there are several elements in it that have payments that are due to vendors.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on suspension before we vote? Okay, this is again just for suspension only. Those in favor of, we have a motion and a second to suspend. Those in favor of suspension only, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The rules have been suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt ordinance 104-14.
Second.
This particular ordinance has 3 sections, and there will be several appropriations and 1 transfer. The first one is an appropriation for $4,257.15 for the Athens City Community Corrections Act Fund. And what this does is enables the city to issue a refund to the state of unspent funds for an intensive probation program that the city operates. The second one is $15,000 being appropriated out of the Athens City Enhancement Fund for demolition of a structure within the city limits that is needing to be removed. The next item is $4,626.61 for what's called the TIF fund. That's tax incremental funding. And just a very basic or very brief background on tax incremental funding. We have several properties on East State Street that are in an area that participate in this program, mainly out by Walmart, Lowe's, and Staples. In that agreement, the participating property owners make service payments to the county in lieu of property taxes. We receive a portion of this payment from the county. We retain 55% and pay out 45% to the schools. And so at this point, what we're doing is $4,626.61 is the amount that the city owes to the school system. The last amount will be $39,000 that we're appropriating to the water fund. And this covers the amount needed to be appropriated for our Ohio Water Development loan. The second section is a transfer, and it will be $5,000. And this is in the law director's office, and this is transferring money from the supply over to the capital account to cover the cost of computers in the law director's office. And we discussed this in committee last week. Section 3 is the last part of this ordinance, and what it does is authorizes an inter-fund transfer, and what it does is move the money, approximately $39,000, from the water fund, and we had just mentioned that earlier, for payment of a loan, and it moves it over to the water debt fund so that we have enough money in that water debt fund to pay out that loan payment. And that's it.
Any questions or comments from council members or the mayor or auditor? No. Good. Thank you. So we have suspended the rules, and then we have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance that Member Nisley described. All those in favor of adopting the ordinance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 10514, an ordinance authorizing the auditor to reduce 2014 year-end appropriations, introduced by Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you. What we do is annually, we authorize the auditor to be able to reduce our appropriations as we near the year end. We need to make accounting to see what we have available in appropriate and unappropriated balance, and also look at our anticipated receipts and make sure that we have adequate funds to be able to pay out our expenses before the end of the year. So this particular ordinance will authorize the auditor to reduce our year-end appropriations, so we can do that in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Member Nisley. Questions, comments? Ordinance 10614, an ordinance accepting the donation by the Ransom family of a vacant lot located on Grand Drive to remain as undeveloped land, and this is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. We discussed this last week. The Ransom estate would like to donate this particular lot located at the end of Graham Drive to the city to remain as undeveloped conservation land. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you. And we're very fortunate to be recipients in situations like this in the city. Ordinance 10714, an ordinance authorizing engineering services for the Depot Lift Station Project 286, introduced by Councilmember Patterson.
This particular piece of legislation is to appropriate funding from the unappropriated balance of in the amount of $50,000 from the sewer debt fund 758 TC 600 and transfer it into the sewer fund 750 to begin the engineering services, or to look at particularly the engineering services for this major sewage trunk in the city, and start improving the major lift station, the depot lift station that sends that waste onto the wastewater treatment plant. It also authorizes the Service Safety Director to extend up to $60,000 from the sewer maintenance fund, 750 TC 500 if need be.
Thank you. Questions, comments, Mayor? Ordinance 10814, an ordinance authorizing funds for engineering services for the North Congress Street sanitary sewer, and this is project number 289, and again, introduced by Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is another major project that's going to take place in needing to begin the engineering services in appropriating monies from the sewer debt fund again and transferring it into the sewer fund 750 in the amount of $45,000. This is an old trunk, an old sewer line that has a storm drain system right next to it. There's a lot of cross connections that need to be addressed and dealt with, at least through the engineering services to look at this particular project and to correct them moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, good. Wonderful. We now are moving on to a one reading resolution, which a number of us will be commenting on. This is Resolution R1314, a resolution in support of the Essence of Athens design plan, introduced by all council members. I believe I have a couple comments as well, along with Member Patterson, and maybe a few others will comment. Essentially, this resolution is in support of the Essence of Athens design plan, which is a strategic design plan for economic enhancement and community competitiveness. Our city planner worked extensively and at length on this project, as well as receiving input and help from our Public Works Director and guidance from Kyle Bazell, who is the principal design advisor on this project as well from Columbus, Ohio. And we had a number of community members that offered time and input over the process of helping design and make the ideas that are in this literature. A number of us have all received copies of this, and there are a few more left in the city. But there's a wealth of information in here.
It's also a PDF on our city website. You can find it on the documents. Download it, read at your leisure.
Yeah, because there are minimal copies of these. It's a limited edition, isn't it?
Yeah.
As I understand it. So it's a great read.
We might
But you
send
can
more
read it
maybe
online.
more of it.
We are getting ready to implement on West Union Street. We're getting ready to implement one of the designs we talked about in committee last week, and it'll be in the crosswalk. So that's coming forward and kind of exciting.
It is. Thank you, Mayor Patrick. Member Patterson?
Shall I read the?
Yes, sir.
I'll read the resolution in its entirety.
Thank you.
A resolution in support of the Essence of Athens design plan, whereas this plan characterizes the key elements that make Athens unique, and whereas our community is rich in history, culture, art, and soul, and said design plan will reflect all these in our built environment, and whereas the Essence of Athens specifically details design sections of the 2003 Athens Comprehensive Plan, and whereas such design elements will emphasize our city's distinctiveness, and whereas this plan encourages inspiration and local design. Therefore, be it resolved by the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 1, Athens City Council does hereby support the Essence of Athens strategic plan to promote the economic enhancement and encourage development of those elements that truly make the City of Athens unique. Section 2, this resolution shall be in full force and effect at the earliest moment permitted by law upon its passage and approval by the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I also want to take a second again to thank the members of the committee that were involved and instrumental in working on this. Lori Burkett, Barbara Fiocchi, John Lepelholtz, Alvy McWilliams, Patty Mitchell, Tim Pfaff, and Sandra Slight Brennan, as well as our beloved city planner, who worked extensively on this. Last year we got to receive, 2011, the A&EP4, the Arts and Economic Prosperity Research Study Project, indicated that there is a huge economic impact from the arts in our community, with 24.3 million nonprofit artistic cultural events yielded that much profit, generated 739 full-time equivalent jobs, and infused our local and state government with over $2.2 million in revenue. So we understand and get that this is a possible cornerstone for tourism and, again, more economic enhancement in our community. So again, I applaud all the hard work that went into this. I applaud the mayor for supporting this endeavor as well, and helping make his officials available for this work. And we're at the juncture moment here to get to support this.
I'd also like to add to that real quickly, and that is that a lot of you, at least in council, have seen the most recent report in terms of tourism, and that's a big part of this equation as well. $139 million for 2013, which is a significant increase over the past years in which that report has come out. And again, just to to say this is that, granted, not all that is from the arts, but I think a good portion of that does come from the arts, in showing that it does enhance a community. It is an economic driver for a lot of communities throughout southeastern Ohio, throughout the world. But in southeastern Ohio, it seems like we've really got something that we're holding on to, which is a movement in the right direction. And this Essence of Athens kind of gives us a blueprint, a template to kind of look at, think how we could evolve and move forward.
I think that's an excellent point in terms of economic viability in terms of our early conversations earlier with that amount of different type of people coming to this town. What is it that they view in their view shed? I'd just like people to keep that in mind.
Any other questions or comments? Mayor?
It's all too good.
Council members? Okay, we need a motion and a second. I would like to make a motion. How's that? Second, we have a second.
I'll second.
We do have a motion and a second then. All those in favor of supporting Resolution R1314, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. The resolution has been passed. Wonderful. At this juncture in our meeting, we have completed our readings, and now we're looking at announcements and other business. This is an opportunity to acknowledge whether or not we have any committee meetings coming up. So there was a Finance and Personnel meeting was Wednesday, the mayor requested for a change of time.
Wednesday, 3 o'clock.
Wednesday at 3 p.m., thank you.
What?
I said Wednesday, 3 p.m., thank you.
Yeah.
Any other committee meetings scheduled for next week to acknowledge? Member Nyson?
Yes, finance and personnel.
Finance and Personnel? Member Patterson?
City Safety Service.
City Service Safety?
Not yet
No,
for
no,
transportation.
We do have a couple other business issues. We have a D5 liquor license potential request for hearing here from Chipotle Mexican Grill. My understanding is that we can make a request if we would like to as council. And I'm not exactly sure what dates or how soon.
This has to be postmarked.
No later than 11/14/14, so November 14th. So we need to make our request prior to that.
I would just like to put out there that as a single council person, I would like to make that request. I assume we can vote on it another time.
Thank you. Another similar sentiment?
I would be interested in
Another announcements we have, this is an opportunity for us to designate our law director, Pat Lang, as a National League of Cities representative. He has served before in the past for us, correct? Correct. Thank you for your service work. And we have to vote correctly to do that. So all those, well, do we have a motion to nominate Pat Lang as our representative?
I so move.
We have a motion and a second. Wonderful. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you, sir, for your continued hard work there and serving in the future.
Thank you for your...
You're welcome. We also have the other business. We have, please approve the September finance reports. I don't know who this is from.
I would move that.
Thank you.
Approve the September finance one.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful. We have a motion and a second to approve the September finance reports. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Okay, wonderful. We've approved the September finance reports. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Auditor. Thank you for bringing this forward, too. We also, I get to speak briefly here on the request from the Athens Municipal Arts Commission to approve our last member. We had another vacancy, or our last vacancy, and there has been interest and discussion of approving Sandra Slight-Brennan, who was instrumental, again, in her volunteer work for this endeavor, the Essence of Athens, and she has expressed interest in working with the Municipal Arts Commission and sitting in as a member of that commission. I did forward, I believe correctly, each one of you should have received a copy of her resume, and I hope you had an opportunity to look over. And she recently moved back into the city, so she meets the criteria necessary for that as well, having previously been, I believe, a Amesville/Fed-Hoc resident. So I'll make a motion to approve her presence and membership.
Second.
Thank you. A motion, a second. All those in favor of her placements as a member of the Athens Municipal Arts Commission, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Same sign. Wonderful. Thank you, Sandra Slate-Brennan, again for your service work and volunteering with our community and the Arts Commission. Any other announcements or business? None noted. We do offer an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that were not covered on this evening's agenda. So you are granted a moment for such. Okay. None are expressing interest. We will be moving at a point here for an executive session. So I will, prior to moving into executive session, we will allow the individuals in the audience to ask questions or comment or come up to council. So it is approximately 9 p.m. We'll grant 10 minutes before we move into executive session. So before we move, before we stop for this moment, we do need a motion to move into executive session.
I move that we go into second executive session.
Second, and then please list. We need a motion to mention the reason.
Yes.
I'm sorry, thank you. For pending litigation and property.
Pending litigation and property acquisition.
Thank you. And then we also need to identify who present we would like in there.
Aye.
We need the motion to include the
Auditor Heck, Mayor Weil, all council members present, Pat Lang,
No law director.
law director.
So all those in favor individually?
Roll call.
Roll call, please. Aye.
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 Super. Okay, thank you. And thank you for your patience, audience. So we'll take 10 minutes for questions and comments, and then we'll move into executive session. Thank you.